いい加減しつけえぞ。
事情が変わった。悪いな。今日はノーと言わせる気はない。
あ
あ？これわかるな。お前が使ってた召喚機だ。新しい敵が現れた。俺たちと同じペルソナ使いだ。
別に。
Persona 3 came out to the PlayStation 2 in 2006. It was followed by another version called Persona 3 FES. Prior to this, the last Persona game had been Persona 2 Eternal Punishment from 2000 on PlayStation 1. If you know about the first two games and you have been living under a rock since the release of 3, you might be confused why the games look so different from the first two. That's because the original creator Satomi Tadashi left Atlus shortly after the release of Eternal Punishment. The new director for the series, Katsuda Hashino, and his team had completely different ideas for what to do with the series. There is a bit of a controversy surrounding Hashino these days, and to be fair, the controversy is very justifiable. I don't want to get into much details about that, but one thing I need you to understand that, like the guy or not, he did save Atlus from basically being bankrupt back then. They were not in a good financial situation, and Persona 3 pretty much changed the fortunes not only for the series itself but for Atlus as a whole. That's why they still to this day milk Persona games so much. To accomplish that level of success, they had to change the series drastically, and that's why Persona 3, 4, and 5 are so different to the first two. I already mentioned Persona 3 FES, or FES if you prefer to call it that way, for the PS2, but there was another version for the PSP years later called Persona 3 Portable. That version turned out to be a little more popular than the original game, and because of that, there was something that a lot of people brought up as soon as the remake was announced. A feature that was in that version that has never returned to the series since, and that is the option of playing as a female protagonist. Playing as a female protagonist meant you could have social link with characters, well, male characters, that was not possible with a male protagonist because I guess canonically Makoto Yuki is straight, I don't know. If you're new to Persona, you might be confused about the whole social link thing, but I'll explain that when talking about the gameplay. One thing I need you to understand is that this remake is pretty much in line with the original release of Persona 3, not FES, and not portable. Well, I guess it does bring a few features from both versions. Even so, I'm here to tell you that Persona 3 Reload is just awesome, and I hope you'll be convinced by the end of this review. There will be spoilers for the story during the first week of the game or so, but not much beyond that. The story begins when the protagonist, Makoto Yuki, or whatever name you give to him, arrives in the Tatsumi port island to the city of Iwatodai. Ever since his arrival, he witnesses a lot of weird things happening, culminating one night when he's attacked by bizarre creatures in his new student dorm and awakens the power of his persona. The dorm doubles down as a base of operation for members of the SEAS, which stands for Special Extracurricular Extermination Squad. It's a group of students with enough potential to awaken their own personas and use their powers to exterminate shadows, creatures that appear during a phenomenon that occurs after midnight called Dark Hour. During the Dark Hour, everyone without the potential turns into coffins, and from their point of view, the Dark Hour never happens. Time flows differently during the Dark Hour. It's not literally an hour. The game doesn't explain how that works very well, but the important thing to keep in mind is that the Dark Hour makes using the power of personas possible. The Dark Hour also makes the city school transform into some enormous tower full of shadows crawling about. Before Makoto joined the SEAS, they had been mostly on standby, observing the moves in the shadows and balancing their operations with their school lives. With a full group, they decided to start exploring Tartarus in hope of investigating the tower and finding out more about why the Dark Hour exists or how to get rid of it. Parallel to all of this, Makoto has visions or dreams of a mysterious room where a man named Igor talks to him about having some kind of special role to play, and how his power as a Persona user is very unique. And every few nights a boy called Pharos appears in his bedroom to remind him the world is ending. And that's the setup for Persona 3's plot. For Persona 3 Reload, it's basically the same, they don't really change the events of the story. What Reload adds is a lot of optional events you can use to see more interaction between the main characters and some extra development. Some of those events are called linked episodes. I haven't played Persona 3 Portable myself, but I heard the linked episodes are based on the MAOC social links from that version. Completing those social events with your teammates unlocks new abilities which makes them more useful in combat. Linked episodes add more dimensions to the characters. I like them a lot because in the PlayStation 2 versions of the games, the MAOC's characters didn't seem fleshed out enough. Well, I guess Junpei kind of was, but the point is these episodes made me care a lot more for the characters involved. As for the rest of the social events, there are things like asking characters to tend to plants with you, help them cook something in the kitchen, or watch TV together. Sometimes you have the chance of inviting everyone for some group studying before exams, but I found those events very excessive in a game with over 40 hours of voice dialogue. I didn't feel like they added anything to the development of the characters or their narrative. It's one of those things that it's only going to be appreciated by huge fans of the cast who will take any excuse to see more of the interactions. Persona games have a lot of dialogue interactions between the main characters that doesn't add anything important to the table, and often hammer you in the head over and over with the same information about the character or what everyone else is doing regarding the current series of events, as if they're scared you might, I don't know, forget in the next 5 minutes or something. The excessive dialogue might not bother you as much if your play sessions consist of advancing a few days at a time. Trying to do really long sessions while you're reading and listening to everything is extremely exhausting, and I've played a ton of JRPGs. It gets real bad if you're doing a New Game Plus run or replaying the game and you're not interested in revisiting the plot. For some ungodly reason, the game will only let you skip some of the cutscenes and dialogue. Most of it cannot be skipped. You can only press a button to move it in turbo speed. Why? Why waste my time like this? I've never seen any other game do it like this. Is it so I'm forced to select one of the few completely inconsequential dialogue choices during the dialogues? If you've seen the story already, you should be allowed to skip each scene entirely. There is no reason for this nonsense. Keep in mind I'm talking about the main story events, not the social links which I'll explain in the gameplay section. Anyway, if you enjoy checking out what NPCs have to say around town, the game will be a treat. They have something new to say every in-game week or so. Your friends at the dorms have new dialogue almost every day, and some of it can be funny to read. Just keep in mind that at the end of the day, this is still going to be a game about high school students, so a lot of the things they talk about will involve friendship, relationships, and the good and bad of school life. There are also going to be dates in the calendar that are reserved for things like school trips. At the same time, Persona 3 is actually hands down the darkest of the Hashino Persona games. For every teenage life hijinks, there are a lot of serious topics like suicide, corruption in religious cults, serious school bullying, depression, inevitability of death, just to name a few things that get brought up. The main plot also goes to very dark places towards the end. The game doesn't pull its punches in that department. A Persona game is what happens when you combine a visual novel with a light version of life simulation and dungeon crawling with turn-based combat. I'll explain the life scene side of it first. The game follows a strict calendar system. Each day there are a number of activities you can do. The type of activities depends on the time of the day. Every activity will help you increase your social stats, some Persona stats, give you a little money, or build towards your social links. Social links are a very important feature in the game and the main feature for the live scene side of it. It involves hanging out with these named NPCs around town that have their own short story arcs. You can think of social links as a way of simulating friendship with the named NPCs. The closer you are, the higher is your social link rank, and maxing the rank will reward you with the ability to summon powerful personas. Don't worry, I'm gonna talk about summoning personas later, one thing at a time. In Persona 3 Reload, all the dialogue from social link events is fully voiced. Well, okay, that's not true. There are some hangouts you can do during the weekends when the NPCs message you that aren't really voiced because they don't involve ranking up. But every rank up event will be fully voiced. To rank up, you need to reach a certain threshold of affinity with them. You gain more or less affinity depending on what you answer during dialogue prompts. You can also get a boost if you're carrying a persona of the arcana that matches that social link. The rank up system for social link is the main reason why the calendar of Persona games can be considered very strict for completionist runs. Let me try to explain. Every social link has their own set schedule. There will be days they're never available, and there may be times where they will be gone for a little while. You have a limited amount of days to spend doing the live scene stuff, building your social stats, unlocking other activities that will give you access to other social links, and because it's so limited, messing up your increases means that you're basically wasting days that could have been spent raising the ranks. And as I mentioned before, the game is sort of on a timer. There are only so many days you can spend in a single playthrough. The game does have a New Game Plus that allows you to carry over a lot of things from your first playthrough, including max social link rewards, into a second playthrough. If you're really into the game and you really want to keep playing it after beating, this is a blessing because it gives you a reason to continue. The game was designed with New Game Plus in mind. They weren't really expecting players to try completing every social link in one playthrough or all the other things you can complete. But if you're someone like me who has already played Persona 3 three times, not counting with the remake, and you just want to move on, but you also want the trophies and achievements or what have you, then you're gonna want to use a guide. The calendar in the original game was already pretty strict. Reload adds even more activities and things like the linked episodes for you to worry about, which take a good chunk of your calendar. There are very few days that could be described as free days to fix any mistakes it might have made. But I don't want to be unfair here. The game wasn't designed to be played this way. It wasn't designed for you to complete in one playthrough. Making those wrong choices in the social links is part of the experience. Sure, it might motivate people to do save scumming just so they can get the best result, but that's on them. Following a perfect guide will take the roleplay out of the game, and besides, you don't need the rewards you get from maxing out the social links in one playthrough to beat the game anyway. Oh, by the way, if you're new to Persona games, don't get into the activities expecting a Like a Dragon style experience. Whenever you choose an activity, what happens is that you have a brief cutscene with Makoto doing a thing automatically and then being rewarded for it. So unfortunately, you shouldn't expect to actually play an arcade game when going to the arcades, or having to do a singing minigame in the karaoke. It might be a little disappointing, but the activities are mostly checklists that you have to cross so you can unlock other activities that may get you different rewards or unlocking other social links. A few social links and activities will be locked behind achieving a certain threshold of social stats, so you need to do activities that increase those stats if you want to get there. You also need a certain level in academics to pass on school exams, which, yes, are a thing. There are also a lot of shops around Iwato Dai. Most of them are for things that can be used as gifts for social links that may have turned into romantic ones. Of course, because this game is also a dungeon crawler, you also have shops that are relevant to the dungeon crawling, like the equipment shop at the police station and the pharmacy which sells recovery items. There is also an antique shop that you can use to craft special weapons and gear, but I'm gonna talk more about it later. I know I'm saying this a lot in this review, but bear with me, I need to talk about this in a particular order. There are way too many features in this game. In spite of the game featuring high school students, you don't actually have that many activities in the school itself. Most of them are outside the building. Although you do have classes sometimes that you have to read through and questions to answer, and most importantly, the exams. But compared to the rest of the live scene content, school is really a tiny fraction of the experience.
竹場さんの部屋とか入れちゃうわけ？何が秘密だよ。それって何もないってことだろ。
The dungeon crawling and battle focus side of the game is split into two types. Tartarus, the huge tower that appears during the dark hour, is the biggest time sink in it, and it's not even close. The other battle content involves operations that have to be completed whenever a full moon occurs. They're mandatory story events, so the calendar always includes a countdown for the next full moon, so you can be prepared. Once you complete a full moon operation, higher floors are unlocked in Tartarus. Full moon operations are actually rather short. Sometimes they will involve clearing a very tiny dungeon, other times they're just gonna jump straight into a boss fight or two and that's it. Tartarus itself is a very long dungeon with more than 100 floors. Those floors are divided into blocks, which are divided by border floors. Border floors usually come with treasure chests and a teleporter that lets you exit and return to that floor anytime. Every floor that isn't a border floor changes its layout every night you choose to explore the tower. And if I'm being honest, even with the changes in layout after you spend enough time exploring, the location of some of the rooms becomes easy to deduce. They're not really as varied as they could be. Those floors have shadows crawling around, objects you can break for items you can use or sell for money, and random treasure chests. On rare occasions, the breakable objects might drop twilight fragments. Those fragments are important to interact with some of the reload exclusive features. First, there are locked chests, which can take between 1 to 3 fragments to unlock. As a general rule, until the second semester when you'll be swimming twilight fragments, it's not a good idea to unlock chests outside the border floors, because those chests are not random and always give you worthwhile items. Second, there are clocks like the one at the entrance of Tartarus. For the cost of 7 fragments, the clock will restore HP and SP for everyone, even allies not in your active party. And lastly, there are special gates that have a chance of appearing whenever you open a locked chest in the randomized floors. The gate leads to a giant clock that lets you pick 2 members of the Seas to give a huge level boost. You need to win one fight with the members you selected for that to happen though. This works nicely as a catch-up mechanic for characters you haven't used in a while. There are 3 types of shadows moving around the floors of the tower. You can see them in your minimap and you should use that to make sure you're not attacked by them before you attack them first. Preferably from their back. Hitting a shadow from behind guarantees your party gets the initiative in battle. Battles are turn-based and turn order is tied to each character's equipped persona's agility stat. Basic structure of combat is about what you should expect from any turn-based JRPG. You pick the command you want to do for each character, or you can configure them to act automatically, which is a terrible idea and you should never do that. The commands are attacking with your weapon for physical damage, using an item, guarding to reduce incoming damage, escaping from the fight, or using your persona's skills. You can also check the enemies for their weakness without taking a turn, but to actually reveal that information you need to use attacks of each type in a bit of a trial and error. Makoto can change his equipped persona once per turn without losing that turn. He's the only one with this ability though. Exploiting weaknesses is the most important mechanic to get used to. Every enemy will have some kind of weakness, vulnerability to certain stats ailments, and resistance to some attributes. If you hit them with the attribute they're weak against, they will get knocked down, which makes them vulnerable to becoming dizzy. If all enemies are knocked down, you can do an out-out attack for massive damage. Knocking an enemy down also gives the character who attacked an extra turn. You can use that turn immediately or let someone else use it. This allows you to exploit a shadow's weakness, then pass your extra turn for someone else who can exploit the weakness of another enemy in the group. There are a lot of different strategies you can use, but this one is the most common. Some enemies might not have any kind of weakness. In that case, you're supposed to use skills that decrease their stats or cast ailments they're vulnerable to. As far as I know, there is no way to tell if an enemy is vulnerable to a certain ailment until you try it. But some ailments will make it easier for you to land a critical hit, which also has the effect of knocking down an enemy. Battles in Persona games are very tactical, but not hard. Because Personas can only learn up to 8 skills, you're never overwhelmed with options. Even someone not used to JRPGs can figure out a good strategy. The knockdown mechanic speeds up fights a lot and animations don't take long to play out. It's all very fast-paced and snappy despite being turn-based. The guard command can also be useful sometimes. It doesn't only reduce damage you take, but also prevents the character from being knocked down even if they're struck by an element their persona is weak against. While the Persona games are not really hard, they do have some unfair RNG at play in some of the fights. The biggest offender being the number of instant death skills enemies might use. The two common ones are associated with light and dark elements. Elemental resistance will protect you against those skills, and sacrificial items you carry will also protect you until they run out. Problem is, you will run out of those, and resistance against those skills is very uncommon. Now imagine fighting a boss you know nothing about. Finding out that they cast skills that are effective against you, getting them extra turns, then getting a game over because you can't possibly predict that sort of thing without an online guide. Worst of all is that if Makoto dies, it's straight to game over for you. I guess the other Cs lose all will to live as soon as he faints in battle and don't even think about raising back to health. I mean, why would you, right? On the bright side, the game does let you retry any battle, so you can keep trying until you win, unless you really needed some items to remove ailments or better equipment, in which case you have to reload your save, exit archers, buy what you need the next day, and waste another night going back to continue exploring. Being punished this hard because of the trial error approach of some of the battles is not fun. Reload added another feature that helps making fights a little easier to handle. It's something called Thurgy. When a character's Thurgy gauge is maxed, you can use their Thurgy skill. Most are just damaging skills that ignore elemental resistances. They are purely for dealing high damage and don't help with knockdowns. Some Thurgy skills offer support to the party, recovering their HP or SP, or boosting their stats. There are all kinds of effects and they can be turned into a trump card when necessary. You unlock more Thurgy skills by completing linked episodes and social activities with your allies. Makoto, however, learns a lot of Thurgy by unlocking specific personas. Completing those social activities with your allies will also unlock new abilities for them that are activated automatically as long as they're in battle and alive. Now, like I said, there are 3 types of shadows. Aside from the common types you see everywhere, there are also stronger shadows which have a visible red aura. Those are obviously stronger than the other shadows in the set of floors you're exploring. They're a little harder to ambush, but not really by much. They also give more experience points to compensate the challenge. The third type is called Rare Shadow. Those look like small Mickey Mouse gloves with a face completely covered in gold. They always run if they notice you approaching, and if you don't engage with them fast enough, they disappear. Those shadows have high evasion and usually resist to anything but their one weakness. You have to exterminate them fast and reap their incredibly generous reward. It's actually really easy to exploit these shadows by quickly using the skip travel feature to move from a floor to the next, then using the teleport to start up from the first floor of a block and repeat the process until you can see a rare shadow icon in the minimap again. If your level is high enough, shadows become afraid of you, making it really easy to avoid fighting at all, which makes this exploit even easier to abuse. Oh, that's right, there actually is a fourth shadow in Reload, Greedy Shadow. They look like giant versions of the rare shadows. If you encounter one, all the treasures in that floor will be empty. You have to choose to go after the Greedy Shadow, which is its own little chasing minigame. If you're able to guess direction correctly and corner the shadow, you can beat in a very easy fight and get tons of rewards. Aside from a couple scripted encounters, they are extremely rare. Winning a battle has a chance of triggering shuffle time. You can then pick an extra reward for winning, like more experience points, money, or a skill card, which you can use to teach a specific skill to any persona. Knocking enemies down increases the chance of triggering shuffle time. If you're lucky, a major arcana might appear as one of the rewards. Those are cards that when selected activate a special effect once per Tartarus visit. Some of those effects are very minor, like temporarily increasing stats or giving extra random items. Others are very useful, lasting until you exit back to the dorms, like increased experience gain, the ability to pick 2 rewards per shuffle time, or increasing the damage from all-out attacks. You have a limited number of slots for major arcanas per day, and after all slots are occupied, an arcana burst happens, raising the tier for all your shuffle time rewards until you leave Tartarus. The last feature to talk about before moving to talk about persona summoning are monad doors. Those doors start appearing later in the game. They might appear randomly any floor, and if you want to, you can go through to clear a fairly strong enemy encounter and open chests for materials for the antique shop. Some of the border floors will have a Mona door as well. Those are always there no matter which night and contain a series of boss fights a few notches harder than the average. The treasure in those doors will add more major arcanas to the shuffle time pool and increase the number you can activate. Reload does a good job at making Tartarus feel fresh and very addictive through the major arcana and its other new features. There are also some dark floors that contain a surplus of Twilight fragments, and sometimes shadows with stats ailments that affects their behavior outside of battle. By the way, those dark floors also come with the effect of really speeding up the spawn timer for the Reaper. The Reaper is literally what it sounds like, a very powerful boss that shows up if you stay too long in the same floor. Unless you're near the end of the game, you're screwed if you let it get close to you, and in Reload it might even follow you to the next floor. For a game that gets described as simply a visual novel with dungeon crawling gameplay, this game sure has a lot of features. I suppose I said I'd get back to the topic of the antique shop. Well, the objects you break and the shadows you kill in Tartarus will sometimes drop materials you need to craft the items and gear listed in the shop. Getting enough materials for more than a handful at a time is actually so time consuming, even I, the master of grinding, couldn't do it. Equipment from the antique shop always comes with special effects. They tend to outlast what you can buy from the police station. This is also how you gain access to the best equipment in the game. But for that you need material that drops not from shadows but from high tier personas when they reach a certain level. To wrap this up, let's finally talk about persona summoning. To manage your persona business, you need to visit a place called Velvet Room. You can enter the room through a door hidden in Paulonia Mall any time of the day or by the entrance of Tartarus. Inside you have a menu that lets you select personas to fuse into a stronger persona, with summon personas from your current compendium, or register personas you have equipped to update their compendium entries. Summoning from the compendium costs money. The more complete the compendium becomes, the cheaper the prices for summoning. Most personas are unlocked by fusing 2, but there are a few special personas that require a very specific combination. Those have their own menu option. Whenever you try to fuse a persona, you have to select a few skills across the 2 you're combining to transfer over to the resulting persona. This system allows you to experiment with all kinds of skill builds. It's not really something you have to worry about if you're just trying to beat the game, but if you're a min-maxer and you want to complete the optional challenges, or maybe even if you just want to do a harder difficulty on New Game Plus, learning to plan skill builds for any persona you want is a must. Some personas will not be listed as possible fusions until you finish a certain linked episode or max a social link. Your social link ranks also affect how much experience a persona gains in the fusion process. This is very important because leveling a persona through battling takes forever. There is one mechanic that I absolutely despise here: fusion accidents. There is a small chance a fusion might go wrong and you're left with a completely random persona instead of the one you wanted. I've never seen anything good come out of this. It's a waste of time that just makes me mash the button to exit the room, then reload my save and try again. I don't know why this anime mechanic exists, it's only funny the first time it happens. As a pro tip, remember that Makoto's combat stats depend entirely on the equipped persona stats, and you also want to make sure you have personas of the arcanas that will boost the gains for the social links you're working on. You can only carry 6 personas at the beginning, but as Makoto levels up, you're able to carry more for a total of 12. So make sure to build a selection that covers all kinds of enemies. Music from the Persona series is well known for its catchy energy at this point. The soundtrack is composed by Shoji Meguro, who has also been the main composer for the Shin Megami Tensei series for some time. Every Persona game changed its music style. Persona 3 music often includes vocals for the live scene style gameplay, and is very Japanese dance-centric with a side of hip-hop. All the lyrics are in English though. The tracks just give good vibes and stick with you easily. Unless you really hate this style of music, which is definitely not the case for me.
Yes.
Whenever things get serious or focused on the Dark Hour and siege operations, the music direction shifts completely. It becomes a lot more ominous, with a strong touch of melancholy. The flexibility of Meguro as a composer is pretty good. He can compose songs that even someone not into video games would absolutely jam to, and still create background tracks that can only be described as heart-rending. Anyway, Shoji Meguro is one of those composers that makes games sell many soundtrack CDs. Wait, do people even buy CDs anymore? As a big Persona 5 fan, the 3D models of that game have always looked rather off-putting to me. Something about how their arms were animated, making them look like eerie dolls, and something seriously wrong with their eyes when seen from the front. I'm very happy with what the models in Persona 3 Reload look like. None of those issues are here. The models look pretty close to their portraits, almost as sharp as they appeared in pre-rendered cinematics. In fact, I much prefer the cinematics that use 3D models instead of the 2D anime style they alternate with. The character design just looks phenomenal in the official artwork and dialogue portraits, while everyone looks less detailed in those anime FMVs. Outside of the cinematics and battle animations, the models still look very inexpressive though. The portraits are animated and include more than one expression, which thankfully distracts you from paying too much attention to how cheap the models' animations are when they're talking. Okay, I'm being a little harsh. The game does look really good. The anime shading is the best I've seen in an Atlus game so far. It also runs super smooth all the time. The models for the scenery and objects is often very simple and low poly if you look closely, but the color composition makes everything blend together so well as a background for the characters themselves, you're really not gonna notice it. The art style they're going with here is going to help the game age incredibly gracefully. Of course, you cannot talk about visuals in a Persona game without talking about the battle effects and menus. Visual effects and animation for combat moves are very snappy and clean, without missing detail. It's not a huge obnoxious fireworks show like Final Fantasy does it, but it still looks very beautiful. 3G moves are a lot more flashy, but they are the exception, not the rule. The menu received a huge overhaul from the original. It goes with the blue color motif for Persona 3, featuring an animated model of Makoto in a filter that makes him look completely 2D. Every menu option is accompanied by cool visual changes in the background, which reinforces feedback on what your cursor is targeting rather than distract you from what you're doing. Every combat menu is also really stylish. Somehow, it matches the visual identity of the game's graphics and art style so well it never takes you out of the experience. Persona 5 started this trend with the heavily stylized menus, and it looks like that's turning into a Persona tradition. Persona 3 Reload is missing features from FES and Portable, namely the ability to change weapons for Makoto and being able to be a female protagonist with social links for the male C's allies. Even so, there are more than enough new features and improvements to justify buying it at full price. Okay, if you played through any of the other versions of Persona 3 recently, maybe not. It's a remake that's very faithful to the original PS2 release, so the main story events and battles are pretty much just better looking versions of themselves. Atlus already confirmed the epilogue episode introduced by the FES PS2 release is coming this September, so you shouldn't worry about missing that content. Of course, it's paid DLC, which is a little disappointing. But hey, it's not like that epilogue adds much to the plot. I played on PS2 and the extra dungeon crawling was fun, but the narrative felt like filler, or at best as a way to give closure to die-hard fans who really love the characters. As for Persona 3 Reload, the base game itself, I can't recommend it enough. If you're new to Persona, it's as good as an entry point as 5 is. If you're already a Persona fan and you weren't sure if this version would be worth it, I think it is. It's another example of what is an almost perfect remake of an already great game. As of the making of this review, the game is available on Game Pass, PC, on Steam, and on PlayStation 5. Thank you for watching and take care.